1885, Montana Territory. Eleanor Sterling stepped onto her porch with a basket of mending and froze. The stranger was splitting wood behind her barn, and he had removed his shirt. Golden afternoon sunlight gleamed on bronzed skin and defined muscle as the axe swung down with practiced precision. She knew she should look away. A proper widow did not stare at half-naked men. But her eyes would not obey. Tracing the line of his broad shoulders, the flex of his arms, the way sweat glistened on his back. He turned suddenly, catching her watching, and a slow, knowing smirk spread across his handsome face. Heat flooded Eleanor's cheeks. She dropped the basket and fled inside, her heart pounding like she had run a mile. Through the window, she watched him laugh and shake his head before returning to his work. That man was trouble. Dangerous, attractive trouble she could not afford. 2 hours earlier, she had been reviewing the bank's foreclosure notice when he rode up. Tall and confident, sitting his black horse like he owned the world. When he knocked, she answered with her late husband's rifle in hand. He raised both hands, that same infuriating smirk on his face. "I am not here to rob you, ma'am. I am Elijah Chambers. I believe we own this ranch together." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, trying to process what he had said. "That is impossible. This is my ranch. My husband built it. He died for it." Elijah pulled folded papers from his saddlebag. "Your husband, Thomas Sterling, won half this property from me in a poker game in Billings 2 years ago. I have the deed right here. He was supposed to buy me out or split the land. He did neither. I have come to claim what is mine." Eleanor's hands shook with rage. "My husband is dead. He died last winter, trying to save our cattle in a blizzard. You show up now, after I have worked myself to exhaustion for a year keeping this place running, and claim you own half of it?" Elijah's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss, ma'am. Truly. But sorry does not change the law. I own half this ranch. We can work together, or I can force a sale and take my share. Your choice." She wanted to shoot him. Instead, she lowered the rifle and stepped aside. "You can sleep in the barn. We will settle this in the morning." He tipped his hat. "Much obliged, ma'am." That night, Eleanor paced her bedroom, fury and fear warring in her chest. The bank was already threatening foreclosure. She owed $300 by the end of October, just 6 weeks away. She had been counting on selling her cattle to make the payment. Now this stranger appeared claiming half ownership. If he forced a sale, she would lose everything. The ranch was all she had left of Thomas, all that remained of the life they had built together. She could not lose it. She would not. The next morning, she found him already awake, repairing a broken fence rail. He worked with the easy competence of a man accustomed to hard labor. When she brought coffee, he accepted it with a quiet thank you. They sat on the porch steps, the autumn morning crisp and cool. "I need to see those papers," she said finally. He handed them over without argument. She read every word carefully. The deed was legitimate, signed by Thomas, and witnessed. Her throat tightened. "Why did he never mention this to me?" Elijah shrugged. "Maybe he meant to buy me out and never got around to it. Maybe he thought he had more time. I am sorry. I know this is not easy." Eleanor folded the papers and handed them back. "What do you want?" Elijah looked out at the rolling prairie, the mountains in the distance. I want what is mine. I spent 4 years fighting in the war. When I came back, I had nothing. I worked as a scout, saved every penny, bought this land. Then I lost it in one stupid night of cards. I want it back. Eleanor understood that feeling all too well. The desperate need to hold on to something that was yours. Very well. We are partners then, but I am still running this ranch. He smiled. A genuine smile this time, not a smirk. Would not have it any other way, ma'am. She is Eleanor, not ma'am. Eleanor. He extended his hand. Elijah. They shook on it, and she tried to ignore how warm and strong his hand felt, wrapped around hers. Over the next week, they fell into an uneasy routine. Elijah worked hard. She would give him that. He repaired fences, patched the barn roof, and helped her move the cattle to better grazing. He never complained, never shirked. At night, they ate supper together at the kitchen table, going over accounts and making plans. The bank payment loomed over everything. We need to sell at least 30 head, Eleanor said one evening. That should cover the debt and leave us enough for winter supplies. Elijah studied the ledger. The cattle market in Helena is good right now. We could drive them there, get top dollar. It is a 3-day drive. Eleanor nodded slowly. Can you handle that alone? I need to stay here and finish the harvest. Elijah looked up, his blue eyes steady on hers. We go together. You leave this place unattended for a week, and claim jumpers will be all over it. We take the cattle, sell them, come back together. Eleanor wanted to argue, but he was right. I will need to arrange for someone to watch the place. Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch can check on things. Elijah nodded. Then it is settled. We leave in 3 days. The morning they left, Eleanor was tightening her saddle when Elijah appeared beside her. Let me check that. His hands brushed hers as he tested the cinch, and she felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. When had she started noticing him so much? When had his presence become something she looked forward to instead of resented? You are staring again, he said softly, that hint of a smirk in his voice. She jerked her gaze away. I was making sure you did it right. He laughed, a warm, rich sound. Of course you were. They drove the cattle northwest toward Helena, taking it slow to keep the animals calm. The fall weather held clear and cool, perfect for travel. At night, they made camp under the stars. Elijah built the fire while Eleanor cooked supper. The domesticity of it felt strange and right all at once. Tell me about the war, she said one evening as they ate. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. It was hell. I saw things no man should see. Did things I am not proud of. When it ended, I just wanted peace. Land of my own. A place to build something that mattered. That is why this ranch means so much to me. It is not just property. It is a future. Eleanor understood that completely. That is how I feel too. Thomas and I dreamed of building something lasting here. When he died, I thought about leaving, but I could not. This place is part of me now. Elijah looked at her across the fire, his expression serious. We will save it, Eleanor. I promise you that. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to trust him. And that terrified her. On the second night, a storm rolled in fast and violent. They barely had time to get the cattle secured before the rain hit. Elijah grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter. They huddled together under the overhang, soaked and shivering. The storm raged around them, lightning splitting the sky. Eleanor found herself pressed against Elijah's chest, his arms wrapped around her for warmth. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. "I have got you," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe." Something shifted in that moment. Eleanor looked up at him, water dripping from her hair, and saw the way he was looking at her. Not with calculation or amusement, but with something deeper. Something that made her breath catch. "Elijah," she whispered. He cupped her face with one hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Tell me to stop." She could not, did not want to. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she felt something inside her chest crack open. She had not been kissed since Thomas died, had not wanted to be. But this felt different, felt right. She kissed him back, her hands sliding up to grip his shoulders, and he made a low sound in his throat that sent heat flooding through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elijah pressed his forehead to hers. "I have wanted to do that since the day you stared at me chopping wood." Eleanor laughed shakily. "I was not staring." He grinned. "You absolutely were. And I loved it." She should have been embarrassed. Instead, she felt light, almost giddy. "What are we doing?" He pulled her closer. "I do not know. But I know I have never felt this way about anyone before. And I think maybe you feel it too." She did. God help her. She did. The storm passed, and they returned to camp. The cattle were fine, just restless. Eleanor changed into dry clothes in the wagon, while Elijah rebuilt the fire. When she emerged, he was watching her with an expression that made her pulse race. They did not talk about the kiss. But everything had changed. When he helped her onto her horse the next morning, his hands lingered on her waist. When they rode side by side, their knees bumped together. Small touches, loaded with meaning. Eleanor had thought she was done with love, thought that part of her life was over. But here was this man, stubborn and strong and unexpectedly tender, making her feel alive again. They reached Helena on the third day and sold the cattle for a good price. $320, enough to pay the bank and have some left over. Eleanor held the money in her hands and wanted to cry with relief. "We did it," Elijah said, smiling. "We saved the ranch." She looked up at him, this man who had become so important to her so quickly, and felt her heart swell. "Thank you. For everything." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We are partners, Eleanor. Your fight is my fight now." They made one stop before leaving town. Elijah bought supplies while Eleanor visited the land office. She returned to find him loading sacks of flour and sugar into the wagon. "What were you doing?" he asked. She handed him a folded document. "I had them draw up a new deed, 50-50 ownership, both our names. Legal and binding." Elijah stared at the paper, then at her. "Eleanor, You did not have to do this. She met his gaze steadily. Yes, I did. You were right. This ranch belongs to both of us, and I want it that way. He pulled her into his arms, right there on the street, not caring who saw. You are an amazing woman, Eleanor Sterling. She held him tight. We make a good team, Elijah Chambers. The ride home felt different, lighter. They talked and laughed, making plans for the winter. We need to reinforce the barn before the heavy snows come, Elijah said. And I want to build an addition to the house, a proper bedroom. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm at the implication. That would be nice. He glanced at her, his eyes full of promise. I have plans for us, Eleanor. If you will have me. Her heart pounded. Are you asking what I think you are asking? He pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted, then lifted her down from her saddle. His hand stayed on her waist as he looked down at her. I am asking if you would consider marrying me. I know it is fast. I know you loved your husband. But I love you, Eleanor. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to be your partner in every way. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She had loved Thomas. Part of her always would. But Thomas was gone, and Elijah was here, real and solid, and offering her a future she had thought impossible. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and she felt her last walls crumble. This was right. This was real. This was the second chance she had not known she needed. They arrived home to find Mrs. Patterson waiting with troubling news. That banker, Mr. Kincaid, has been here twice. Said he wanted to inspect the property before accepting payment. There was something cold about him, Eleanor. Something wrong. Eleanor's blood ran icy. Elias Kincaid. She had not heard that name in 3 years. What did you tell him? Nothing. I said you would be back soon, and he would have to wait. Mrs. Patterson looked worried. Do you know him? Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. He is not a banker. He is my former fiancé. I broke our engagement 3 years ago when I discovered he was using my father's money to cover gambling debts. He swore he would make me regret it. Elijah's jaw tightened. He is using a false name to foreclose on your ranch. This is revenge. Eleanor nodded, fear clawing at her throat. The debt is real. Thomas borrowed from a bank in Billings. But somehow, Elias bought the note. He has been planning this. Before Elijah could respond, horses approached. 3 riders, with Elias Kincaid in the lead. He was still handsome in a cold, polished way, his suit expensive, his smile cruel. Eleanor, darling, how lovely to see you again. His gaze slid to Elijah. And you must be the partner. How convenient. This makes things simpler. Elijah stepped in front of Eleanor, his hand near his gun. State your business and get off our land. Elias laughed. Your land? I hold the deed to this property, along with the mortgage note. And according to my records, you are 3 days late on your payment. That means I can foreclose immediately. Eleanor pushed past Elijah, fury overriding fear. We have the money. Right here. She pulled the bank receipt from her pocket. Paid in full, as of yesterday. Take it and leave. Elias barely glanced at the receipt. I am afraid that payment is invalid. You see, the note specifies payment must be made in Billings, at the original bank. Payment anywhere else is unacceptable." He smiled coldly. "You should have read the fine print, Eleanor. This ranch is mine now, and there is nothing you can do about it." Elijah moved fast, drawing his gun and leveling it at Elias. "You are not taking this ranch. Not today. Not ever." Elias's men reached for their weapons, but Elijah's voice cracked like a whip. "Try it and you die first. All of you. I fought in the war. I have killed more men than I can count. Do not test me." The men hesitated, seeing death in Elijah's eyes. Elias raised a hand. "Stand down." He looked at Eleanor, his expression ugly. "You always were a fool, Eleanor, choosing dirt farmers over a man of means. But you will regret this. I will have this ranch, one way or another. Mark my words." After they rode away, Eleanor collapsed against the porch rail, shaking. Elijah holstered his gun and pulled her into his arms. "We need to get to Billings. Tomorrow. We will take that payment directly to the bank and make sure it is recorded properly." She nodded against his chest. "He will not give up, Elijah. He is vindictive and patient. He will find another way to hurt me." Elijah tilted her face up. "Let him try. I will be right here, and I will protect what is ours. You are not alone anymore, Eleanor. You have me." They left at dawn, riding hard for Billings. The journey took 2 days, pushing the horses to their limits. At the Billings Bank, they met with the manager and presented the receipt. The banker reviewed it carefully. "This payment is perfectly valid. I will mark the note as paid in full immediately. Who told you otherwise?" Eleanor handed over Elias's calling card. This man claimed to hold the note and said payment had to be made here specifically. The banker frowned. "Elias Kincaid did purchase the note from us 6 months ago. But there is no requirement about where payment is made. Any bank receipt is valid. He lied to you." Elijah leaned forward. "Can he contest this payment?" The banker shook his head. "Not legally. The debt is satisfied. I will file the paperwork today. Your ranch is clear." Eleanor felt tears of relief sting her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As they left the bank, Elijah took her hand. "It is over, Eleanor. He has no claim on you or the ranch anymore." She wanted to believe that. But she knew Elias. He would not accept defeat quietly. They were halfway home when they spotted smoke on the horizon, black and thick, rising into the sky. Eleanor's heart stopped. "That is coming from our ranch." They spurred their horses into a gallop, racing across the prairie. As they crested the final hill, Eleanor saw her worst fear realized. The barn was burning, flames leaping high into the twilight sky. 3 figures on horseback were riding away toward the east. Elias and his men. Elijah did not hesitate. He rode straight for the barn. "The animals. Eleanor, we have to get them out." She followed, terror and fury warring in her chest. Smoke billowed thick and choking as they threw open the barn doors. The horses were screaming, panicked. Elijah grabbed halters and started leading them out, while Eleanor ran for the milk cow. The heat was overwhelming, the roar of the flames deafening. A beam cracked overhead, and Eleanor screamed a warning. Elijah shoved the last horse through the door and lunged after Eleanor, grabbing her arm and pulling her out, just as the beam crashed down where she had been standing. They collapsed in the yard, coughing and gasping, watching the barn burn. All their winter hay was inside, all their tools and supplies. Everything they needed to survive the Montana winter. Eleanor felt sobs tear from her throat. He destroyed us. Even without the ranch, he destroyed us. Elijah pulled her against his chest, his own voice rough with smoke and emotion. He destroyed a building. He did not destroy us. We are still here. We are alive. And we will rebuild. How? Eleanor cried. We spent everything on the bank payment. We have nothing left for lumber and supplies. Winter is coming. We will lose the cattle without shelter. We will lose everything. Elijah cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. We will survive this. I do not care if we have to live in the house with the cattle all winter. I do not care if we have to sell half the herd to buy lumber. We will rebuild, Eleanor. Together. Because I love you, and I am not letting anything take you from me. Not Elias Kincaid, not a barn fire, not anything. His words, his absolute conviction, steadied her. She clung to him, drawing strength from his strength. You are right. We will survive. We always do. They stood together, watching the barn collapse into embers, and Eleanor made a silent vow. Elias had taken his last thing from her. She would not give him the satisfaction of giving up. She would fight, and she would win. The next morning, they rode to the Patterson ranch to report the arson. Mr. Patterson listened grimly and promised to spread the word. If Elias shows his face around here, he will answer to all of us. Mrs. Patterson pressed a basket of food into Eleanor's hands. You are not alone, dear. This community takes care of its own. The words brought fresh tears to Eleanor's eyes. She had felt so isolated after Thomas died. But now she saw she had people who cared. People who would help. Over the next week, neighbors appeared with donated lumber, tools, and labor. Men from 3 surrounding ranches came to help rebuild. Women brought food and supplies. By the end of the second week, a new barn stood where the old one had burned. It was smaller, simpler, but it was solid and would shelter the animals through winter. Eleanor stood beside Elijah, watching the final beam go into place, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. We could never have done this alone. Elijah squeezed her hand. That is what community means, helping each other survive. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, Eleanor leaned against Elijah's shoulder. I have been thinking about us, about what happens next. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. What do you want to happen next? She took a breath, gathering her courage. I want to marry you. Soon. Not a big ceremony. Just us and a preacher. I want to start our life together properly. I want to wake up as your wife and build this ranch as your partner in every way. Elijah's smile was slow and warm. I would marry you tomorrow if I could. Eleanor laughed softly. How about next week? We can ride into town, find the circuit preacher, and make it official. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Next week sounds perfect. She felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. Despite everything Elias had done, despite all the hardship and loss, she had found something precious. Love, partnership, and a future worth fighting for. The week passed in a blur of preparation and hard work. They moved the cattle into the new barn, stocked it with what hay they could gather, and made plans for the winter ahead. Eleanor cleaned the house thoroughly and aired out the spare room that would become their bedroom. She found herself humming while she worked, something she had not done since before Thomas died. Elijah caught her at it one afternoon and grinned. "Someone is happy." She threw a dish towel at him. "I am allowed to be happy." He caught the towel and used it to pull her close. "Yes, you are, and I intend to keep you that way." 2 days before they were set to leave for town, a rider appeared. Eleanor's heart sank when she recognized the sheriff from Helena. But his expression was not hostile. "Ma'am, sir, I came to inform you that Elias Kincaid has been arrested." Eleanor gasped. "For what?" The sheriff dismounted, pulling papers from his saddlebag. "Fraud, arson, and attempted theft. Turns out Mr. Kincaid has been running similar schemes across 3 territories. He buys up distressed debt, then uses intimidation and destruction to force people off their land so he can sell it for profit. You were not his first victims. When you filed your complaint about the barn fire, it gave us the final evidence we needed. He will be going to prison for a long time." Elijah shook the sheriff's hand. "Thank you for letting us know." The sheriff nodded. "There is more. The territorial judge reviewed your case specifically. Given the fraudulent nature of Mr. Kincaid's dealings, the judge has ordered restitution. Mr. Kincaid's assets are being liquidated to compensate his victims. You should see a payment of approximately $500 within the month." Eleanor could not speak. $500 was more money than she had ever had at one time. That is enough to fully stock the barn for winter and buy breeding stock in spring. The sheriff smiled. "Yes, ma'am. Consider it justice served. I hope you both have a good life together." After the sheriff left, Eleanor turned to Elijah, tears streaming down her face. "It is really over. He is gone, and we are safe." Elijah swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed through her tears. "It is over, and we won." "We won, Eleanor." They kissed there in the yard, long and deep, celebrating their victory and their future. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Elijah set her down gently. "2 more days until I can call you my wife. I do not think I can wait." She smiled up at him. "Then let us leave tomorrow." "Why wait?" The next morning, they rode to town. The circuit preacher was staying at the small church, and he agreed to marry them that very afternoon. Mrs. Patterson and her husband came as witnesses, along with a handful of townspeople who had heard the news. Eleanor wore her best dress, a deep green calico that brought out her eyes. Elijah wore a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed. They stood before the preacher in the simple wooden church, and Eleanor felt her heart swell as Elijah took her hands. The preacher spoke about love and partnership, about building a life together through hardship and joy. Eleanor barely heard the words. She was lost in Elijah's eyes, seeing her future reflected there. When the preacher asked if she would take this man as her husband, her voice rang out clear and strong. "I will." Elijah's voice was equally firm when he made his vows. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Elijah kissed her with such tenderness that Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was real. This was forever. This was the life she had not dared to hope for. The townspeople cheered and offered congratulations. Mrs. Patterson hugged Eleanor tightly. "I am so happy for you, dear. You deserve every bit of joy." Eleanor hugged her back. "Thank you. For everything. For watching the ranch, for helping us rebuild, for being here today." Mrs. Patterson patted her cheek. "That is what neighbors do. Now go home with your husband and start your life together." The ride home felt dreamlike. Eleanor kept glancing at Elijah, still hardly believing he was her husband now. He caught her looking and smiled. "What are you thinking?" She felt her cheeks warm. "I am thinking how strange life is. 6 weeks ago, I wanted to shoot you for showing up and claiming my ranch. Now I cannot imagine my life without you." He reached over and took her hand. "I fell in love with you the moment you answered the door with that rifle. You were fierce and beautiful and completely unafraid. I knew then I was in trouble." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange. Elijah dismounted and lifted Eleanor down from her horse. But instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her toward the house. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said. "It is tradition." He kicked the door open and carried her inside, setting her down gently in the kitchen. Eleanor looked around at the home that was now truly theirs, shared equally and bound by love. "This is our home now, our fresh start." Elijah cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Our forever." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Eleanor felt heat flood through her. This was her husband, her partner, the man she would spend the rest of her life with. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Eleanor Chambers." She smiled at the sound of her new name. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." He took her hand and led her toward their bedroom, the one he had prepared so carefully, and Eleanor followed willingly, her heart full, her future bright, ready to begin this new chapter of her life with the man she loved. The next morning, Eleanor woke wrapped in Elijah's arms, sunlight streaming through the window. She had never felt so content, so completely at peace. He stirred and pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "Good morning, wife." She smiled. "Good morning, husband." They lay there for a while, just holding each other, savoring the quiet happiness. Eventually they rose and went about the morning chores together. Elijah milked the cow while Eleanor made breakfast. They ate together at the kitchen table, making plans for the day, the week, the winter ahead. Over the following weeks, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Elijah reinforced the barn doors and repaired the corral fence. Eleanor preserved the last of the garden vegetables and made preparations for winter. When the restitution money arrived, they bought supplies and extra feed for the cattle. They hired a hand to help with the heavy work, a young man named Sam, who proved hardworking and reliable. The ranch began to thrive in a way it had not since, before Thomas died. One evening in late November, Eleanor stood at the stove stirring stew when Elijah came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him, closing her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. She smiled. "I am thinking how grateful I am for you, for this life, for everything we have built together. 6 months ago, I was alone and drowning. Now I have you, and I have hope." Elijah turned her to face him. "You were never drowning, Eleanor. You were fighting. You are the strongest person I know. I am the lucky one." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "I wake up every morning amazed that you chose me." She cupped his face. "I will choose you every day for the rest of my life." He smiled, that warm smile that made her heart flutter. "That is good, because I plan to be around for a very long time." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, the stew forgotten on the stove. This was what happiness felt like. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but quiet evenings and steady love. Partnership and trust. Building something lasting together. As winter settled over Montana territory, Eleanor and Elijah prepared for the cold months ahead. They stocked the barn, insulated the house, and made sure they had enough supplies to last until spring. The first snow came in early December, blanketing the prairie in white. Eleanor stood at the window, watching the snowflakes fall, and felt Elijah's arms come around her from behind. "Beautiful, is it not?" She nodded. "I used to dread winter. It took Thomas from me. But this year feels different. This year I am not afraid." "Because you are not alone," Elijah said quietly. "We face it together." The winter was hard, as Montana winters always were. There were days when the wind howled, and the snow piled high against the doors. But inside the house, there was warmth and laughter. Eleanor taught Elijah to play chess, and he taught her card games he had learned in the war. They read to each other in the evenings, books borrowed from Mrs. Patterson. They talked about their dreams for the ranch, about expanding the herd in spring, about building a proper workshop and maybe a bigger house someday. Every conversation was easy, natural, filled with the comfort of two people who truly knew each other. On Christmas Eve, they sat by the fire with mugs of hot cider. Eleanor had made a small cake with their precious sugar stores, and Elijah had carved her a wooden box for her sewing supplies. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood, touched by the care he had taken. "It is beautiful. Thank you." He smiled. "I am glad you like it." She leaned over and kissed him softly. "I love it. And I love you." He pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapped securely around her. "Best Christmas I have ever had." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Mine too." In January, a warm spell melted some of the snow, and they were able to check on the cattle. All the animals had survived the cold so far, healthy and well-fed. Elijah stood in the barn, looking at their small herd with satisfaction. "We did it. We made it through the hardest part." Eleanor slipped her hand into his. "We make a good team." He squeezed her hand. "The best team." They walked back to the house together, their breath misting in the cold air, and Eleanor felt profound gratitude for this life they had built. By late February, the worst of the winter had passed. The days grew longer, and the snow began to melt in earnest. Eleanor and Elijah started planning for spring planting and breeding season. One warm afternoon, they rode out to check the fence lines. The prairie was still brown and dormant, but Eleanor could feel the promise of spring in the air. In a few weeks, wildflowers would bloom, and the grass would turn green. New calves would be born, and the ranch would come alive again. They dismounted at the top of a rise that overlooked their property. The house and barn looked small from this distance, but solid, and enduring. Elijah stood behind Eleanor, his arms wrapped around her waist, and they looked at their land together. This is ours. All of it. Everything we fought for. Eleanor leaned back against him. And everything we will build together. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I cannot wait to see what our future holds. Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. Neither can I. But I know one thing for certain. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Elijah smiled down at her, his blue eyes warm with love. Together. Always. He kissed her then, sweet and tender, a promise of all the years to come. When they broke apart, Eleanor felt a surge of joy so powerful, it nearly overwhelmed her. This was her life now. This love, this partnership, this home. She had survived loss and betrayal and fought for every inch of happiness she now held. And it was worth it. Every moment of struggle had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this profound and lasting love. As March arrived, bringing warmer weather and the first signs of spring, Eleanor and Elijah threw themselves into ranch work with renewed energy. They repaired winter damage, prepared fields for planting, and welcomed the birth of the first spring calves. Sam proved invaluable, handling much of the heavy work while Eleanor managed the household, and Elijah oversaw the overall operations. The ranch was thriving in a way Eleanor had only dreamed of during those dark months after Thomas died. One evening, as they finished supper, Elijah pulled out a rolled paper from his saddlebag. I have been working on something. He spread it on the table, revealing a detailed sketch. It is a plan for expanding the house. Add 2 bedrooms, enlarge the kitchen, build a proper root cellar. Eleanor studied the drawing, her heart swelling. This is wonderful. When can we start? He grinned. Soon as the ground is fully thawed and we can pour a foundation. Maybe early May. She traced the lines with her finger, imagining the future. Room for children someday. A real family home. Elijah covered her hand with his. That is exactly what I was thinking. Eleanor looked up at him, seeing their whole future in his eyes. A family. Children running through these rooms, learning to ride horses, growing up on this land. It was more than she had dared to hope for. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me this, for giving me everything. Elijah pulled her into his arms. You gave me everything, Eleanor. A home, a purpose, a reason to build something lasting. You saved me just as much as I saved you. She held him tight, feeling the truth of his words. They had saved each other. 2 broken people who found wholeness together. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and quiet contentment. They worked side by side every day, building their future piece by piece. Neighbors stopped by to help with the spring roundup and stayed for supper, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Eleanor found herself part of a community in a way she had never been before. These people were not just neighbors. They were family, bound by shared struggles and mutual support. One warm April evening, Eleanor and Elijah sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Eleanor's hand rested in Elijah's, their fingers intertwined. The prairie stretched before them, endless and beautiful. In the distance, they could hear the cattle settling for the night and the soft nicker of horses in the corral. Everything they had fought for, everything they had built together, lay around them in peaceful contentment. Elijah turned to look at her, his eyes soft with love. "Happy?" Eleanor smiled, feeling the word all the way to her bones. "Happier than I ever thought possible." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the scent of prairie grass and spring air and home. "I love you, Elijah Chambers. With everything I am." His arm tightened around her. "And I love you, Eleanor Chambers. Always and forever." They sat there as darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Montana sky. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of life's endless demands. But tonight, there was only this: peace, love, and the quiet certainty that they had found what truly mattered. Not just survival, but joy. Not just partnership, but deep abiding love. They had faced loss and danger, and come through it stronger, bound together by choice and commitment, and the kind of love that lasted a lifetime. Alas, spring deepened into early summer. The ranch flourished under their joint care. The addition to the house was nearly complete, with strong new walls and a solid roof. Eleanor spent her mornings working in the expanded vegetable garden, while Elijah and Sam managed the growing herd. The cattle were healthy and multiplying, and they had already sold several head at good prices in Helena. For the first time since Thomas's death, Eleanor felt financially secure. One June morning, Eleanor was hanging laundry when she heard riders approaching. Her heart clenched instinctively, old fears rising. But then she recognized Mrs. Patterson's cheerful wave. The older woman dismounted with a basket over her arm. "I brought fresh bread and some of my strawberry preserves. Thought you might enjoy them." Eleanor embraced her warmly. "You are too kind. Come inside. I just made coffee." They sat at the kitchen table, and Mrs. Patterson looked around approvingly. "This place looks wonderful, Eleanor. You and Elijah have done remarkable work." Eleanor felt pride swell in her chest. "We have been blessed. The community's help made all the difference." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "That is what neighbors do. But you and Elijah earned this success through your own hard work and determination. You should be proud." After Mrs. Patterson left, Eleanor stood in her kitchen, looking at the home she and Elijah had built together. New curtains hung at the windows, curtains she had sewn herself. The shelves were stocked with preserves and supplies. The table was sturdy and large enough for the family she hoped they would have someday. Everything spoke of permanence, of a life built to last. She heard Elijah's boots on the porch and turned as he entered, his face lighting up when he saw her. "There you are. I have been looking for you." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. Eleanor laughed. "I have been right here all morning." He nuzzled her neck. "Well, I missed you anyway." She tilted her head back to look at him. "You saw me at breakfast 2 hours ago." His eyes were warm with affection. 2 hours too long. She shook her head, smiling. "You are impossible." He grinned. "You love me anyway." She kissed him softly. "I do. Very much." That evening, they received unexpected visitors. The sheriff from Helena arrived with a well-dressed man Eleanor did not recognize. "Ma'am?" "Sir, this is Mr. Harrison from the Territorial Land Office. He has some news regarding your property." Eleanor felt Elijah tense beside her. his hand moving protectively to her back. The land office man stepped forward with a smile. "Please, do not be alarmed. This is good news. The territorial government has been reviewing property claims in this region, particularly those affected by Mr. Kincaid's fraudulent activities." He pulled documents from his leather case. "Because your original deed was contested under false pretenses, and because you have improved the land significantly through your own labor and investment, the territorial governor has issued a grant expanding your property boundaries. You now own an additional 200 acres to the north and west, including the creek and timber stands. Free and clear, no payment required. It is compensation for the hardship Mr. Kincaid caused." Eleanor could not breathe. 200 acres, with timber for building and a year-round water source. It was more than she had ever dreamed of owning. Elijah's arm tightened around her waist. "Are you certain? This is legal and binding?" Mr. Harrison handed him the new deed. "Completely legal, signed by the governor himself. Congratulations. You now own one of the largest spreads in this part of Montana Territory." After the men left, Eleanor and Elijah stood in stunned silence. Then, Elijah let out a whoop of joy and swept her off her feet, spinning her around until she laughed breathlessly. "We did it, Eleanor. We really did it." He set her down gently, his hands framing her face. "From nothing to this, from strangers to partners to husband and wife. From barely surviving to thriving." She touched his face, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "We did it together. That is the only way it could have worked." The next morning, they rode out to explore their new land. The creek ran clear and cold, perfect for watering livestock and irrigation. The timber stands were thick with pine and aspen, enough wood to build whatever they needed for years to come. Elijah dismounted and helped Eleanor down, and they walked along the creek bank hand in hand. "This changes everything. We can expand the herd significantly, build a second barn, maybe even a small bunkhouse for hired hands." Eleanor's mind raced with possibilities. "We could dam part of the creek, create a pond for the cattle, plant orchards on that southern slope." She looked up at him, excitement dancing in her eyes. "We could build something truly lasting here, Elijah. Something to pass down to our children and grandchildren." He pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "That is all I have ever wanted. A legacy. Something that matters." They stood there by the creek, the Montana sun warm on their faces, and Eleanor felt the last pieces of her old grief finally release their hold. She would always love Thomas, always carry him in her heart. But this was her life now, vibrant and real and full of promise. Elijah was her partner, her love, her future. And together, they were building something extraordinary. Over the following weeks, they made plans for the expanded property. They hired 2 additional hands, young men from town looking for steady work. With Sam's help, they began clearing land for a larger pasture and marking timber for harvest. Eleanor expanded her garden, planting fruit trees and berry bushes that would produce for years to come. Every day brought new progress, new growth, new reasons to feel hopeful about the future. One warm July evening, Eleanor was weeding the garden when she felt Elijah's presence behind her. She looked up to find him watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "What is it?" He held out his hand to help her up, Come with me. I want to show you something. She brushed dirt from her skirt and took his hand, curious. Where are we going? You will see. He led her to the new north pasture, to a spot overlooking the creek where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. There, under a large cottonwood tree, he had built a bench. Eleanor gasped. Elijah, when did you do this? He guided her to sit, settling beside her. I have been working on it for weeks, wanted it to be perfect. This is your spot, Eleanor. When you need quiet or time to think, this is yours. Eleanor traced the smooth wood, seeing the care he had taken with every joint and curve. She looked out at the view, the creek flowing peacefully below, the prairie stretching endlessly beyond. It is beautiful. Thank you. Elijah took her hand. You give me so much, Eleanor. Your strength, your love, your partnership. I wanted to give you something back. A place that is just yours, where you can find peace. She turned to him, tears stinging her eyes. You have given me everything, Elijah. Everything I needed and more than I ever hoped for. He cupped her face gently. I love you, not just today, but every day, for the rest of my life. She leaned into his touch. I love you too, more than words can say. They sat there together as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, and Eleanor felt complete contentment settle over her like a blessing. This was happiness, not the absence of hardship, but the presence of deep abiding love. Partnership that made every burden lighter and every joy sweeter. As August arrived, bringing heat and the work of harvest, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but now she was certain. The knowledge filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She waited until evening, until she and Elijah were alone on the porch after supper, to tell him. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. There is something you need to know. We are going to have a baby. Elijah froze, his eyes going wide. A baby? She nodded, watching emotions chase across his face. Shock, joy, wonder, and something like fear. Are you sure? She smiled. I am sure. Probably due in February or March. He pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. Eleanor. Oh, Eleanor. A baby. Our baby. She felt his chest hitch and realized he was crying. She held him, her own tears falling freely. Are you happy? He pulled back, his face wet but glowing. Happy does not begin to cover it. I am overwhelmed, grateful, terrified, all of it at once. She laughed shakily. I know exactly what you mean. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. You are going to be an amazing mother. And our child is going to be so loved, so incredibly loved. Eleanor leaned against him, feeling their future unfold before her. A child, the family they had dreamed of. Another piece of their life falling into place. The months that followed were filled with preparation. Elijah became almost overprotective, insisting Eleanor rest more and not lift anything heavy. She found it both endearing and frustrating. I am pregnant, not fragile. I can still work. He crossed his arms stubbornly. I am not risking you or the baby. Let me take care of you. She softened at the love in his eyes. All right. But you cannot treat me like glass. I need to stay useful. They compromised. with Eleanor handling lighter tasks and Elijah taking on anything strenuous. Mrs. Patterson became a regular visitor, bringing advice and baby clothes she had saved from when her own children were small. The community rallied around them again, gifting them a cradle, blankets, and other necessities. Eleanor felt surrounded by love and support in a way that made her eyes sting with gratitude. She had been so alone after Thomas died. But now, she had a husband who adored her, a thriving ranch, good neighbors, and a baby on the way. Life had given her more than she ever imagined possible. As her belly swelled through fall and into winter, Eleanor and Elijah spent evenings planning for their child's arrival. They set up the nursery in one of the new bedrooms, painting the walls a soft yellow and arranging the furniture with care. Elijah carved a rocking horse and a set of wooden blocks, his hands gentle and sure. Eleanor sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart expanding with every stitch. They talked about names, about hopes and dreams for their child, about the kind of parents they wanted to be. One December evening, with snow falling softly outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, Eleanor sat in the rocking chair while Elijah knelt beside her, his hand on her belly. The baby kicked strongly, and his face lit up with wonder. "Did you feel that?" She laughed. "I definitely felt it. Our child is going to be strong. Like you." He looked up at her, his expression soft. "Like us. Strong because we are together." She ran her fingers through his hair. "I cannot wait to meet this baby. To see your eyes looking back at me from our child's face." Elijah stood and pulled her gently to her feet. "Dance with me." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "There is no music." He began to hum a soft melody she did not recognize and swayed with her slowly. "We do not need music. We have each other." She rested her head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, and let him guide her in their small private dance. This moment, this perfect moment, was everything. Love made tangible. Joy made real. As winter deepened and Eleanor's due date approached, Elijah grew more anxious. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you?" Eleanor took his face in her hands. "You are not going to lose me. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Mrs. Patterson has agreed to be here, and she has delivered dozens of babies. I will be fine. We will be fine." He held her close. "I cannot lose you, Eleanor. You are everything to me." She kissed him softly. "You will not lose me, I promise." In late February, on a cold, clear night, Eleanor's labor began. Elijah rode through the darkness to fetch Mrs. Patterson, his heart pounding with fear and excitement. The older woman arrived quickly, calm and capable, and took charge. She sent Elijah to boil water and gather clean linens, giving him tasks to keep him occupied. The hours stretched long and difficult. Eleanor labored through the night, and Elijah paced the kitchen, praying desperately. Finally, as dawn broke pink and gold over the Montana prairie, a baby's cry pierced the air. Elijah's knees went weak with relief. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, beaming. "You have a daughter. A beautiful, healthy daughter. And Eleanor is doing wonderfully. Come meet your child." Elijah moved into the bedroom on shaking legs. Eleanor lay propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up at him. tears streaming down her face. "Elijah, come see her." He crossed to the bed and looked down at his daughter for the first time. She was perfect, tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look right into his soul. Eleanor placed the baby in his arms, and Elijah felt his world shift fundamentally. This was his daughter, his child, the most precious thing he had ever held. "Hello, little one. I am your papa." The baby made a small sound, and Elijah's vision blurred with tears. "She is perfect, Eleanor. Absolutely perfect." Eleanor reached up to touch his face. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names for months, but never quite decided. Now, looking at his daughter, Elijah knew. Rose. For the wildflowers on your bench. For beauty growing in harsh places. For new life and hope. Eleanor smiled through her tears. Rose Chambers. It is perfect. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Rose was a good baby, rarely fussy, and Eleanor took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything. Elijah was besotted, spending every free moment holding his daughter, talking to her, singing to her. Sam, on the other hand, teased him good-naturedly about being wrapped around such tiny fingers. Mrs. Patterson visited often, bringing food and advice and helping with household tasks so Eleanor could rest and bond with the baby. One warm March afternoon, Elijah carried Rose outside for the first time. Eleanor walked beside him, still recovering but growing stronger each day. They stood in the yard, looking at the ranch they had built together. The house stood solid and welcoming, smoke curling from the chimney. The barns were full of healthy animals. The fields were ready for spring planting. And in Elijah's arms, their daughter slept peacefully, unaware of how much love surrounded her. "This is what we fought for," Elijah said softly. "This moment, this life." Eleanor slipped her arm around his waist. It was worth it. Every struggle, every hardship. It brought us here, to this. He kissed her temple. "I am the luckiest man alive." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "We are both lucky. We found each other, survived together, and built something beautiful. That is more than luck. That is love." As spring arrived in full force, bringing new growth and renewal, the Chambers family settled into their new normal. Eleanor managed the household and cared for Rose, while Elijah ran the ranch operations with Sam's help. They hired another hand to help with spring roundup, and the ranch continued to prosper. Neighbors stopped by regularly to see the baby and offer congratulations. The Chambers Ranch had become a cornerstone of the community, known for hard work, fair dealing, and genuine hospitality. One evening in late April, after putting Rose to bed, Eleanor and Elijah sat on the porch watching the sunset. Eleanor leaned against him, feeling bone-deep contentment. "A year ago, I never would have believed I could be this happy." Elijah tightened his arm around her. "A year ago, I was still drifting, looking for purpose. You gave me everything, Eleanor. A home, a family, a reason to build something lasting." She turned to kiss him softly. "We gave each other everything. That is what partnership means." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, Rose slept peacefully in her cradle. The ranch stretched around them, peaceful and thriving. And Eleanor felt, for the first time in years, that everything was exactly as it should be. She had survived loss and found love again. She had fought for her home and won. She had built a family and a future worth every moment of struggle it had taken to reach this point. Elijah stood and pulled her gently to her feet. "Come to bed, wife. Tomorrow brings another day of work." She followed him inside, through the home they had made together, past the nursery where their daughter dreamed innocent baby dreams. In their bedroom, Elijah held her close, and Eleanor felt safe, loved, and profoundly grateful. This was her life. This love, this partnership, this family. And she would cherish it with everything she had for all the years to come. As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, Eleanor whispered into the darkness, "I love you, Elijah Chambers." His response came soft and sure. "I love you too, Eleanor. Always and forever." And in that moment, with her husband's heartbeat steady beneath her ear and her daughter breathing peacefully in the next room, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happily ever after. Not without struggle, not without pain, but earned through courage and trust, and the kind of love that made everything worthwhile. The future stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. More children, perhaps, continued growth of the ranch, years of partnership and love. Whatever came, they would face it together. That was the promise they had made and kept. That was the foundation of everything they had built. And Eleanor fell asleep, smiling, her heart full, her life complete, knowing she was exactly where she belonged.